The snapback of economic sanctions on Iran today fulfills President Trump's promise 90 days ago when he withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal. At the same time, the administration is trying to get North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons and dealing with ongoing Russian aggression. At the center of all of this, National Security Advisor Ambassador John Bolton. I spoke to him a short while ago. Ambassador, thank you very much. What is the goal of the sanctions that are snapping back today?
Well, we believe that the government of Iran has not given up its intention to get deliverable nuclear weapons. And so by abrogating the Iran nuclear deal, which we felt was fundamentally flawed, this enables us to put sanctions back on and to recreate the pressure that we think will be necessary to get the regime to change its behavior. We've been in consultation with our allies about this. We're all of a mind. We don't want Iran to get nuclear weapons. But I think we all also recognize that the Iran deal didn't cover ballistic missile development. It didn't cover Iran's terrorist activity. It didn't cover Iran's belligerent military activity in the Middle East. We think all those issues need to be on the table to talk to Iran about.
Some of those activities that you mentioned across the Middle East are fundamental to Iran's regime and fundamental to Iranian behavior. Are you actually trying to change the Iranian regime itself?
No, that's not the administration policy. But, you know, when you say support for terrorism is fundamental to the Iranian regime, it puts us on a course that's flatly contradictory to basic American national interest. Iran has been the central banker for international terrorism for a long time. That's not behavior that we should tolerate. And when you consider the danger of a terrorist regime in possession of nuclear weapons, I think you can understand why our concern with the badly flawed Iran nuclear deal led the president to withdraw the United States and to take the steps we've taken, which we think have already had a significant detrimental impact on Iran.
But with all due respect, sir, a lot of people listen to what you've said and what you've written over the years, your support for the group MEK, a group that advocates for regime change, and also the administration's policies right now in general, advocating for protests that are calling for political change, as well as putting economic pressure on the regime. Is that not a policy to actually change the regime itself?
No, it's not, and I'm always happy to have reporters and anchors refer to my previous writings. I'm glad you had a chance to read them, but that's not what I do now. I give advice to the president. I don't make decisions. I think I can say that we are determined to put enormous, unprecedented pressure on the regime to get it to change its behavior, and I think the collapse of the Iranian currency, it's down by more than 2/3 from the beginning of the year, much of it in the last 90 days. The flight of large amounts of money out of Iran. The Iranian elites are taking their money out of the country, putting it in European bank accounts to safeguard it. And the protest we've seen all around Iran, from those in Tehran itself to small towns and villages, where the people are showing their enormous discontent with the regime of the Ayatollahs, shows that the pressure is having an effect.
The regime often uses anti-U.S. propaganda, but the U.S. itself is actually relatively popular among the Iranian people. And I wonder if you have any fear that whether your strategy risks alienating the U.S. among the Iranian people at the very time that you're calling for Iranian people to protest.
Look, what we've seen in these demonstrations, which, as you know, began in earnest in over 100 towns and cities last December, is that the protesters, farmers, shopkeepers, workers, not the educated elites, although they're getting increasingly involved, what they've been chanting is death to the regime. They haven't been chanting death to America this time. Actually give regular people a good deal of credit for common sense. I think they know their problem is with the regime in Tehran, not with the United States.
Mr. Ambassador, I want to move to Russia, and I want to read you something that you wrote last summer. As you said, you've changed roles now, but I do want to read it. You wrote last summer, quote, "Trump got to experience Putin looking him in the eyes and lying to him, denying Russian interference in the election. It should be a fire bell in the night warning about the value Moscow places on honesty, whether regarding election interference, nuclear proliferation, arms control, or the Middle East. Negotiate with today's Russia at your peril." You also wrote Russian meddling in 2016 was a, quote, "act of war." If that was an act of war, has the U.S. response been proportionate?
Well, as I say, I love hearing my words read back to me. What I can say today is that the president is deeply concerned about Russian election meddling. He said so on numerous occasions, and that's why he ordered, after a briefing by key agencies on the National Security Council of the steps they were taking to prevent Russian and other foreign meddling in the 2018 election, and the broader issue of influence operations against the United States. That's why he ordered the press briefing that we had.
I think we saw that briefing, and we saw other security officials doing that briefing, but we also see the president himself and the rhetoric he chooses to use, especially standing next to Vladimir Putin and saying that he believes his denial on election meddling in 2016.
Well, now you'll let me finish the answer I was giving. He heard all of what you heard in that briefing. He knew exactly what people were going to say, less detailed because classified information was withheld. And he wanted the American people to hear what the government was doing to protect the integrity of our elections so that they would continue to have confidence in our constitutional process. I think really one of the objectives of Russia and other adversaries is to erode confidence, to erode mutual trust among Americans. And I think hearing that we were working effectively to stop it was important. The president has said on multiple occasions that he believed that Russia had meddled, and he was determined to stop it. And that's the position, that's the policy we're all pursuing.
Were there any areas of cooperation that came out of the Helsinki summit that you are pursuing with Russia today?
We didn't really anticipate that there would be concrete agreements. We felt that this was an opportunity for the two leaders of these two significant nuclear powers to have what we call in diplomacy an exchange of views. And they did, across the full range of issues, including election meddling.
From the Russian side, they say that the two presidents discussed Syria as well, discussed trying to get humanitarian assistance into Syria, repatriate some refugees into Syria, and help reconstruct Syria. Was there any agreement specifically on working together in Syria?
Well, no, as I say, there was a broad discussion. We said, and much of this discussion, I might say, also took place in the expanded bilateral meeting where the two leaders were joined by senior advisors. We talked about the importance of having a political framework within which to consider these questions, and in particular, the president's strong view that we needed to work with the Russians to get Iranian forces out of Syria and back into Iran.
You mentioned Syria, you mentioned Russia and Iran. Russia, of course, has intervened in Syria. Iran is well steeped inside Syria. Do you believe that Russia and Iran have actually guaranteed President Assad's victory?
Well, it's possible. On the other hand, President Putin told me in my preparatory meeting before the Helsinki summit, he told President Trump there that the Russians, too, would like to see Iran out of Syria, although they didn't think they could guarantee it on their own. I think it's unclear exactly what the relationship among the three is, the Assad regime, Russia, and Iran. But, you know, the Trump administration inherited an expanded Russian presence in Syria from the Obama administration, and the growth of the Iranian threat took place substantially during that administration as well. President Trump's objective here is to get Iran out of Syria, get it out of Iraq and Lebanon, get it out of Yemen, get it back inside Iran. That's one of the reasons why any discussion with Iran about their nuclear weapons program has to take place in this broader context, or else we're ignoring a significant aspect of the Iranian threat.
Just want to ask, in the brief time I have left, a couple questions on North Korea. North Korea has frozen nuclear tests, as you know. They've blown up the entrance to their nuclear test facility. They've shut down an engine testing site. They've handed over remains of U.S. soldiers. And North Korea now says that the U.S. is backtracking from some of the commitments that the president made in Singapore. So what steps has the U.S. taken to live up to the president's commitments in Singapore, to provide security guarantees, and to establish a new relationship with North Korea?
Well, the president at Singapore suspended major exercises, joint exercises between the United States and South Korea. That's been done. But what was significant about Singapore was the North Korean commitment to denuclearize, and they have not taken effective steps to do that. Let's just take the decision to close the entrances, as you correctly say, to the Punggye-ri nuclear test site. That was done before the agreement. There were no international observers present really to inspect what was done. There were some, you'll forgive me, representatives of the media who were kept at a distance and not shown anything except the bright explosion. And I think the view in South Korea and elsewhere is that that test site is not necessarily disabled. That's why when you engage in the process of denuclearization, you need international inspection. You need declarations of what North Korea has. You need observers and inspectors who can verify exactly what's happening. That needs to take place in a process of negotiation. We've asked again recently for Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to return to Pyongyang to meet again with Kim Jong-un on this subject. We're not looking for rhetoric here. We're looking for performance of North Korea's own commitment made to us, made to South Korea beforehand to denuclearize.
Are you suggesting North Korea is not living up to that commitment?
I'm suggesting President Trump has held the door open for them. They need to walk through it.
Ambassador John Bolton, National Security Advisor, thank you very much.
Thank you.